Welcome back, and this brings us to the final presentation for day one, which is brought to you by our national diamond sponsor, Cisco, and we know how much I love sparkly things. The topic is Supercharging the Contact Centre today and tomorrow, and it's presented by Omar Tawakol, who's the Vice President and General Manager of the Cisco Contact Centre Business Unit. Omar was the founder and CEO of Voicea, which has delivered an enterprise voice AI to over 10,000 companies. Voicea was acquired by Cisco in 2019. Omar's career also includes founding and being CEO of Blue Kai, the leading data exchange and data management company in the advertising industry, as well as holding senior executive roles at Oracle Data Cloud. He has a Master's in Computer Science from Stanford University and a BS from MIT. Welcome, Omar.
Awesome, great. Well, really excited to be here. I guess those words, "can you hear me now," are the most popular words of 2020. Can't tell you how many times a day I get to hear that, but I'm grateful to be here. And what we're going to talk about today really is about supercharging the contact center. And in particular, I'm going to talk to you about some of the key trends that are shaping the contact center industry. And if you look at the contact center industry, it's a very complex and layered stack with lots of pieces to it. But if you step back and look at the consumer's perspective, it's incredibly simple. Essentially, consumers want to connect the way they want to connect over the channel of communication that they prefer. They don't want to wait. They don't want to repeat themselves, and they want the answer, and they want to feel good about how they got the answer. That is the entirety of the consumer experience. Delivering that is yet another thing that is a lot more complicated. And what we're going to talk about are 5 different trends that are rapidly changing how contact centers work. And just to give you a little context, as mentioned, I run the contact center business at Cisco. We've been in the business for some time, and we now run a footprint of around 3.7 million agents globally. So you're talking about there is kind of the largest footprint in the United States and tied for second globally. So certainly we have a lot of experience doing this as a business, but it changes so rapidly, and really want to just jump into some of the changes that we've been seeing and the industry is actually seeing independent of us. And just to step back, when I talked about those 5 changes that I'm going to jump into, actually let me just reflect on them, what the 5 are. Is number 1, how people communicate in terms of digital experience or channel preference is changing very fast, and software has to support that. The role of the agent in terms of a virtual agent, a human agent, and a what I call super agent, which is a combination, changing very fast. The agent experience itself is changing. The way you customize the contact experience is changing rapidly, and the whole idea of the data and the customer journey data is being disrupted also. So let's walk through these changes. Now, this isn't just our opinion. If you look at this NTT Global CX benchmarking report, there's a lot of data to corroborate this. If you basically ask the experts in the industry, only 28% will say that AI technology meets their current and future needs as the way it's laid out today. So that's quite a minority. The same thing if you look at Omnichannel, the vast minority of people feel that the software today supports the Omnichannel experience the way it should. And a tiny minority feel that they have consistency across customer journeys in the way the technology delivers. So there's lots of work the industry has to do here. In addition to this, Cisco did a survey of 700 professionals across the globe in different industries and different roles within the contact center, and we corroborated these trends quite a bit. And so without further ado, let's jump into the trends. First, if you look at the whole idea of how important is the contact center as a business to brands that are serving customers, and the pandemic has skyrocketed this importance, because if I look at the experience here in California, I haven't stepped physically in a bank in about 7 or 8 months, and so a lot of these businesses are down to two primary ways of interacting with the customers. Number one is e-commerce, and number two is the contact center. So you've seen a lot of investment in this area, and for example, in the midst of a pandemic, our business has grown, and the cloud portion of that business has grown aggressively. So contact center is one of the primary ways brands have to interact with their customers. It's always been important, but it is incredibly important right now, and it's getting a lot of attention. One of the areas that are changing very rapidly, if you look at this study, it was done by Ofcom in the US, in the UK, but data from other places also supports the same issue. And that is that people's preference on how they want to communicate is changing by age. So if we take people 65 years and older, you'll get to about greater than 80% of them prefer phone or email as the method of communication. So if they're going to contact the company, that's how they want to do it. If you take people 16 and below, that number goes below 10%. So it goes from like 80% to 10% when it comes to phone and email. Flip it though, and you talk about what people 16 years and under prefer, you'll find the vast majority of the preferences is going to be around SMS, it's going to be around social, and it's going to be around photo and video, where that same number for 65-year-olds is, it's de minimis. And so this change, or what I call the channel communication flip, is happening so aggressively. It's like a tsunami that's flowing through businesses, and they really need the technology to be able to adapt to this. And so it's really important that people understand this, because sometimes the decision makers on making the selections of the technology are closer to the high end of that spectrum, and are looking at yesterday's communication preference. And so this change is very important. Before I complete this, one thing I want to talk about is, what does this communication preference change mean to your systems? What systems have to be in place to accommodate this? And there's really three parts to Omnichannel. The first is, you need a set of APIs that make all the different channels look similar to the application layer. So that means you need to be able to handle SMS, WhatsApp, Apple Business Chat, Google, WeChat. All these different mechanisms have very different APIs underneath them, but you need a layer that makes it look similar. So that's number one, is the API layer for Omnichannel. The second is you need an agent interface that allows an agent to seamlessly go between these different channels in one place. Many people call it an inbox. And then in addition to that, you need some sort of way of customizing your flows and workflows that is cognizant of all these channels. And the final thing I'll say is, if I contact you as a contact center via email, SMS, and Messenger, you still need to know that it is me and it is the same communication. All of this needs to be accommodated in an omni-channel system. And this is creating a lot of change in the contact center. You may even start to see people enter into digital-only motions to get a foothold into the contact center, and then expand into voice areas. So an area of rapid change. The next area that we want to talk about is really about the changing role of agents themselves. And this really became clear during the pandemic. Everybody here has seen, the flattening the curve discussion with COVID, which was all about making sure that our hospital capacity was sufficient to handle a wave of people who were sick. And if we ever got into the mode that people were sick in such a big wave above our hospital capacity and our capacity to have respirators and all that we need, we'd be in serious trouble as society, so we have to take these preventive measures. So everybody's used to the flattening the curve dynamic. You have the same dynamic in the contact center. And what it is, and it actually got exacerbated during the pandemic, where all of a sudden people had a lot of questions, and they would call you, and then your agents were working from home, and they had to adapt to that different workload. And we saw some situations where people were contacting the contact center in a way that was much greater than the capacity, and they were rejecting the contacts, which is a really bad situation. And so where AI comes into this is you're able to deploy virtual agents. And it's very interesting how you design these. You design your virtual agents so that they handle the easier questions. You don't want to get people in situations where they're having multiple interactions that are going to get rejected and just escalated anyway. So early on, you want to be able to identify the types of problems that a virtual agent can handle, and you try to solve those problems so that it never makes its way to the agent, and then a subset of the interactions make their way to an agent, the context is transferred to the agent, and what you see here now is a curve that comes through to the human interactions, which is below the contact center capacity. And this trend has played out quite a bit. When we look at contact centers who have deployed this before the pandemic, and especially now because of the pandemic, they've been able to flatten that curve and make the agents happier, the customers much, much happier, the NPS higher, the economics more feasible. And this is a real strong proof point that people are taking notice of, and we're starting to see AI more rapidly get deployed. Now, the role of AI isn't about replacing agents. A lot of where the magic comes in is empowering the agents, turning them into super agents so they can do their job faster and they can do their job better. So how does that happen? We already talked about self-service, but the interesting problem with self-service is it means that the harder problems come through to humans, and those problems are now going to mean longer interactions that are more complex interactions. And so you want the AI at that point to focus on making the agent's job easier. You want the AI to do the transcription. In some cases, you're going to want to do some real-time transcription, closed captioning, and even translation. And then what you're going to want to do is have the AI listen to the context of the conversation and do intent detection to try to understand what is it they're really after. Match it either to a knowledge-based article and or match it to a previously resolved case, bubble up a recommendation to the agent in a way that doesn't disrupt the conversation with the customer, and then the agent can apply their own intelligence so they decide if they want to take this or not. And these AI systems need to be aware of the fact that some agents are early in their training and they're going to need lots of recommendations and others are not. And so what this type of technology that we've been deploying both internally on our own technology here at Cisco and based on a partnership with Google called Google CCAI, we're really excited about how this is transforming the economics of the contact center. Once that interaction is done, some agents spent a large portion of the time wrapping up and summarizing the call, and you can use AI to automatically summarize it for them, and saving them time, allowing them to come back into the next interaction. So you are making the whole life cycle of interaction with the agents easier with AI and making the economics much better. So we're seeing this as a major disruptive force in the contact center. The other thing that's disrupting the way the contact center works is people are starting to experiment with more flexible staffing models along the lines of an Uber staffing model. And there's a lot of promise in the contact center in terms of the economics and how they run the contact center. I would give the warning, of course, that it's early days, and there's issues around being able to make sure that, even though it's a flexible model, you need certain knowledge base to come with the folks that are coming on. You have to train them, you have to test them. You have to be able to predict their availability in ways that WFO is used to, kind of a different pool. So WFO has to change to accommodate this. You have fairness of compensation models. If you look at California, we had Prop 22, which people are voting now, and early polling says that Prop 22 might not pass, and they won't consider folks in this gig economy as contractors. And so there's a lot of experimentation here. I don't want to represent that this change has been proven, but it's an interesting change in terms of the staffing model for the contact center. Next thing I want to do is focus on the agent experience. If you look at the agent experience today, actually interview agents, what you'll find is that most of them enjoy the customer interaction. They didn't take this job because they wanted to run away from customer interactions. They want to solve customer problems. They actually get their energy from doing it. So where is the agent attrition coming from? Because it's a huge problem in our industry, and it has been. It's basically the complexity of the work that they have to do, switching between all these different windows and having wait time and complexity. What they want is a system that is integrated, that is simple, and it doesn't create all these delays in serving their customers. And one of the things that's starting to change here is a very high demand for both fully integrated technology, but also intuitive agent experiences, because the agents who are coming to work here are younger, and they're used to Snapchat, and they're used to Twitter, and they want to see consumer-like interfaces in the agent desktop. And their expectations are now that B2B software looks more consumerized. And this is one of the bigger changes that we're looking at, is more intuitive agent interfaces that are extensible. So expect to see more there. Certainly, we at Cisco have some very interesting work there. Another area of change is the business that's serving the customers. The contact center business is evolving, and it's evolving fast, and the workflows are evolving fast, but sometimes the software doesn't support that. So let's kind of walk through how things have been. In the past, when you had an on-premise solution, what you would see is that people would talk about upgrading to the next version of premise, and maybe they were even one version behind on purpose, and they would plan this out for a year and spend over $1 million on the upgrade. And when I hear CIOs describe that experience to me, it is a very painful thing. It should be a thing of the past. And really, that's what the cloud brings, is this velocity where the CIO doesn't have to worry about that. Upgrades are handled by the cloud. They are rolling out code on a weekly basis. So that's part of what you get with the cloud. But the truth is, major changes in the cloud also happen in ways that if you want to customize it, you have to wait for that cloud to add certain admin panel controls. And so it's much faster than Prem, but it's still not fast enough. And so then you saw this big movement with folks like Twilio and Nexmo and many other players that took an API-first approach that basically rolled out APIs, and whenever you got a developer free, they could change the way the workflow in the contact center works just by interacting with the API. And that sort of API-first approach is one that we have also started to take at the contact center. So we've started to roll out AI capabilities in API before it even shows up in our own UI. And we are seeing this really push the entire industry in terms of their expectations of what you can do with customization. Of course, with this, you still have a roadmap. You have developers in your partner or in your own developer staff that has to look at the APIs, and they're developing at the speed of developer. So the latest change that we see that's really interesting is what we call the low-code, no-code model. So you see that with Dialogflow, for example, where you can have somebody who isn't a coder go into the dialogue interface and also with Amazon and develop a skill. And so now you can give business people and operational people the ability to make changes to the way the workflow of the contact center works. So I'll give you some more examples other than Dialogflow. MessageBird just was in the news for its fundraise, and a lot of what they have is embedded in this new thing called a flow builder, which allows you to build UIs, to build workflows just by connecting boxes and arrows. You see the same type of low-code, no-code flow builder orchestration approach in solutions like IMI Mobile. You see it in AI solutions like Unifor. And so we think this is a very, very interesting trend to watch, because it opens up customization beyond the developers and puts it in the hands of the business users and the operational folks. And it moves the pace of change to a daily pace. And so expect to see more of this. We are also deploying technology like this at the Cisco Cloud Contact Center and are watching the developments in the industry very, very closely. The next area we talked about early on was that customers don't want to repeat themselves. And in order for customers not to repeat themselves, the contact center has to have the data on the customer. Worse yet, it's not just that they have data on the customer. I've been hearing, a refrain from business execs for, many years, where they talk about, we have a 360-degree view of our customer. And really what they mean to say is they have an 18-degree view of the customer. Why? Because they don't know that the same customer that came through on the mobile device is the same customer that came through with a cookie on a computer, is the same customer that SMS'd you, is the same customer that emailed you, is the same customer that came through search. To them, those are all different customers because they're coming through different identifiers. So it's not enough to say you have a full view of the customer. You have to actually understand how to connect identity. And if you look at Twilio's acquisition for several $1 billion of Segment, it was because this realization, and that is that people do not call your contact center to complain about the contact center. something else in their journey went wrong. And so a contact center has to be understood in the context of the full customer journey, in their web interactions, in what they put in when they were checking out in their basket, if they're unable to do that, in their email. All these contacts have to be connected to the contact center so that you can really connect the full view, understand when you're talking to a customer what went wrong before they got to this phone call with you or before this chat, and you can map it out. And then you could also use analytics to map it out and understand what are the areas of our journey we need to improve. Some people like to look at the contact center as you would look at any Six Sigma approach, as providing data and signal about other aspects of the business that you can start to automate. And so in order to do that, you need the full customer journey data. And what trend we're starting to see here is that you're moving towards a customer journey as a service API approach to making this data available to the full set of ecosystems. Before coming into Cisco, I had ran the Oracle Data Cloud, which started with a DMP, a data management platform. And that was the advertising industry's journey into building a data store across the entire set of interactions in advertising. After the DMP, a new industry came up, and it was called the CDP, the Customer Data Platform. Again, Segment is a CDP. Cisco has investments in CDP companies, and we are building some capabilities on our own. All of this is this movement towards saying we need a central view of the data, even if that central view doesn't mean it is the where all the data transact in that system. They can transact in other systems, so they come to one system to be able to create a connection between what happened online to email, to chat, to phone call, allow you to make those APIs available to all the different layers in the application stack. This is a very interesting space. You should watch it. One of the other things to watch here is who is controlling the CDP. CDPs typically entered into the enterprise from the marketing stack. And now the contact center has a role to play here. Very interesting and emerging space for you to keep your eye on. I want to give you some real world examples. As I said, Cisco has been in this industry and in the United States has the largest footprint and globally is tied for number 2. But the real change has been happening in the cloud, and we've been seeing even triple-digit growth in the cloud. It is a really, really interesting and compelling space. One of the case studies I wanted to go through here is a state government in the United States, one of our larger, more populated states. Back in March, had a situation where they had over 1 million calls come in over several days, and they were rejecting 90% of those calls and chats, really, because their system was overwhelmed. They weren't able to flatten the curve. They started to engage with us and Google, and they used a unified contact center enterprise solution along with Google CCAI. And with that, they were able to handle 200,000 interactions a day successfully. They weren't rejecting these chats and calls. They were even able to process 40,000 of them after hours. This saved them tens of millions of dollars. It brought them a much higher NPS, and it was core to the system. And we have now seen this type of solution rolled out over several state governments and banks in the United States just over the past few months. In what we call the rapid deployment model, where we're able to get some of these systems up in days. So it's been an amazing journey to watch people deal with the difficulty around the pandemic and then bring AI into mainstream adoption. Another case study we wanted to talk about was one of my favorites is watching kind of the transformation that happened at T-Mobile customer service, where you're seeing a carrier had its NPS over several years rise to the level from the level of a carrier to the level of Nordstrom's. I mean, people just love T-Mobile. And one of the ways they did that is they created a team of experts approach. And the way the team of experts works is rather than mapping a customer to a different team every time, a group of consumers would come to the same team of experts, and that team was a pod that includes customer resolution experts, technology specialists, coaches, resource managers, and then, of course, the customer service reps, all in a pod. And when a question comes in, they're able to use collaboration tools to chat with other team members and experts to solve the customer. And they just inverted their whole view from how fast do I process a customer to how fast do I, in the first interaction, solve the problem for the customer. And it seemed like an expensive change for them to do, but actually the economics were incredible. The economics were that they were able to reduce attrition by about a half. They dropped churn by 25%. They increased NPS by 56%, and they reduced call transfers by 70%. So what you're talking about here is a fantastic increase for everybody, and the economics paid off. And it all was because they flipped the model around solving more for the customer by bringing to bear more of their expertise via collaboration. And the last case study we wanted to share here before we wrap up is from Vivint Solar, and we're going to play a video for you.
We're trying to harness the power of the sun to replace legacy energy utilities. The more effective we are in our communication, the more effective we are in using our own tools, the better we are at our jobs. And our job is to deliver renewable energy to consumers throughout the world. At Vivint Solar, we had multiple solutions for communicating, so our unified communications weren't unified at all. In 2017, we started to look at replacing our telephony system, which was an on-premise system at the time. We just noticed that the quality of the service started to go down. We started to have a lot of outages. We didn't have outages before. We went through a pretty extensive evaluation process, and we built out over 130 criteria that goes into how we use our contact center. We knew that we wanted to go to the cloud, so we weren't really interested in anything on-premise. We started to look for solutions in the market that could allow us to unify around communications. By the end of that evaluation, it became very clear to Vivint Solar that Cisco was the only player in the market that offered everything that we needed. In March of 2019, we went live on WebEx Contact Center, exclusively in our inbound and call center, and we're using the analytical tools that come along with that. And we started the process to replace all of our other systems. Today, Vivint Solar uses WebEx Teams exclusively across our 6,000 employees throughout the United States. We use WebEx Calling now for our PBX solution up in the cloud, and we're using WebEx Meetings company-wide for all of our meetings. We're also using the Cisco room kits throughout all of our conference rooms at our buildings. At the end of the project, we ended up consolidating about 8 technologies into Cisco. So that's all managed within a single pane of glass now, and it's really unified us as a company so that we're all on one platform. Vivint Solar couldn't be happier with the decision that we made to go with Cisco and to implement all these technologies. This has allowed us to be unified in a way that we never have been before. It's drastically increased our productivity and our ability to deliver residential solar to consumers throughout the world.
Thank you, Mike. So I want to wrap this up by bringing it back to the customer. At the end of the day, we said you need to allow customers to connect the way they want to connect. So connect their way. They want to do so in a way that they don't want to wait. They don't want to repeat themselves. They want the answer, and they want to feel good about it. And so these trends about accommodating omni-channel experiences, accommodating virtual agents and super agents, being more flexible in the models and the UIs that are more consumer-like for these agents, allowing much faster customization of the workflow through both API-first approaches and low-code, no-code approaches are really starting to change the velocity with which the contact center workflow evolves. And finally, if we're going to solve the don't make me repeat myself problem, you're going to have APIs that connect the data and make that API layer available to every piece of the application so that we can understand the contact center in the context of the full CX journey, and we can improve that journey. So these are 5 of the trends that we see really turning this industry. This industry is on fire. The move to cloud is accelerating. The embedding of collaboration tools and AI makes it a very exciting space to be in. So I really appreciate your time joining us here. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Omar. I'm feeling supercharged. Is that good?
I hope so.
It is indeed. Thank you so much. I know it's getting later in the evening where you're based in California. Really appreciate you taking the time.